Hey everyone, I thought I might try a different kind of video today. I recently got to do a really interesting photo shoot where a friend of mine who manages an apartment complex and helped design the renovation of that apartment complex's common areas, asked me if I would be interested in taking photos of it for her. And sure. So I took some photos with my Sony a7 IV and the Laowa 10mm. We'll see those will be in color. But I did some really interesting work with sheet film in 4x5 and 8x10 using lenses which were up to about 140 years old. So there'll be a link in the video's description to the full resolution photos that really turned out pretty well. And I'm going to go through some of the specific shoot photos that I think really look good and talk about how I took them and what made them challenging, or different things you could learn if you want to try an architectural photo shoot yourself as well, especially with film. Let's get going. So these first four photos that are in color were all taken with the Sony a7 IV and the Laowa 10mm. This one here is the evening shot, and I always really love how gold and blue work together in photos. I just think that they match up really nicely. Some flaws with this photo that I really am unhappy with include the partially cropped chair on the left and the reflections of the circular light that are up in the top left corner. So the Laowa 10mm is an incredibly hard lens to use. We're going to see that in all four of these photos. And any dust that's on the surface of the lens, if you stop down at all, and this was stopped down a decent amount, you can see by the stars, probably in the f5.6 to f8 range, maybe a little bit smaller. All that dust is going to cause reflections in the image. It's very challenging to work with in that regard, especially if there are light sources in your photos. The second shot is a different angle a couple of hours earlier. You can see again that it's stopped down pretty well, but apparently did not have as much dust on the lens at this point in the shoot because we don't have those same reflections. And as you can see, there is a nice star coming from the sun through the blinds. So overall, this is a photo I think turned out decently well. I would have preferred it had been in the evening with some nice oranges and blues outside. But overall, I think the general structure of it is okay, even if the lighting is very, very harsh. Our third photo with the Laowa was taken in a different part of the space. And honestly, I was really kind of surprised by, this was the photo that really drove home how wide the Laowa is. That lamp was not really that far in front of us. It's centered over that little coffee table, which was, I want to say, a foot in front of the lens, give or take. So in terms of the overall structure of the photo, I'm not unhappy with the structure, but if I had to do over again, I think I wanted to have the lamp be centered. I think I would have shifted the lens and the camera to the left a little bit or to the right and done away with the centering of the light and gotten that entire chair on the right or that couch on the left fully in the frame instead. For our last photo from the a7 IV and the Laowa, here we have a late afternoon shot of the same scene that we've seen a couple of times. And you can see how the lighting in it's a little bit different here. Also, one of the things that really stands out with this shot, and as I've started doing a lot, is I underexpose one stop. And then in RAW, I recover the shadows. And that does a lot of good for balancing out the shadows and the highlights in the image, because the highlights, like the sky in the background, are retained, and the shadows are very easily recovered with any modern digital camera shooting RAW. So that's how we get this image. It's not an HDR. Everything in here was adjusted in RAW with an image that was one stop underexposed to preserve the highlights. So we're going to switch now to the film cameras. These first two shots were going to be taken with the Ghibellini ACN2 4x5 camera, and they were taken with the Schneider 72mm f5.6. This first one was taken on Kodak Tri-X 320. Pretty short exposure. You can see it's a different angle of one of the scenes we've already seen already. Honestly, pretty happy with how this turned out. I do really like keeping the frame of sheet film in the digitized image. I just think that it's a nice way for me to show that I'm using the entire negative. And also I like the way that the negative text and notch code add a little bit to the image as well as the shape of the frame if there's a frame mask in it. So the exposure on this turned out really well. Tri-X320 is a really forgiving film with indoor lighting. You can see the outside still has detail and that the some of the sky highlights are blown out, but you can still make the trees out in that parking lot or whatever it is across the street. This next shot was taken on a Zebra glass plate brand. The only place I know of to buy them is on Etsy. That's where I've been buying them from. They come from the EU. And this was taken with the same Ghibellini and Schneider 72 millimeter. This was a long exposure. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but this is a 2 ISO film. I don't think I needed bulb for this. I think it was about a second, because I think I shot this around f/16 to get a nice deep depth of field on it. I was really pleased with how the slats behind the chair turned out, even though if I had it to do over again, I'd go take this photo in the evening when the shadows weren't being cast so strongly on the carpet there, and try to get more even illumination on the carpet from the overhead lighting instead of having such a dominant outside light. But one other thing I really like about this is the way that the glass plate, which you can see is captured in digitization here as well, adds that little perimeter texture to the image and kind of shows that this was an analog photo taken on some medium that isn't standard film. We're going to switch here to 8x10, and this first shot was taken with the Elgate Navitar 10-inch, which is a 254mm f4.5 lens. This is supposed to be a 4x5 lens, but wide open, it covers 8x10. Stop down to f/16, it only covers 4x5, which is weird because usually large format lenses have a bigger image circle stop down. Clearly not the case here. Even wide open, this lens is super sharp. And given that this lens came off of a 4x5 camera that was apparently used in the World War II era to, as I understand it, to photograph the landings of aircraft on aircraft carriers, maybe after the World War II era. At any rate, it was used in some sort of Navy setting for recording things like that. But this lens is like super sharp. And also, even though it's an f4.5, there's still a nice subject isolation where the chairs and the table here are in focus. And even by the time the image gets to the blinds behind them, that's starting to get soft, and the building behind it is very soft and out of focus. I did take one of these at f/16 that had a much smaller image circle, and the building was rendered sharply as much as it could be through the blinds. So that was how I was able to figure out which photo was which. This next photo was taken with the Schneider Dasikar lens from 1925. It's a 155mm f/12.5. As you can see outside, the sun had set behind the mountains. It was really dark in here. This was a very hard lens photo to compose because it's a dark lens. What I had to do, I put the dark cloth over my head. I could not see anything on the ground glass. So what I did was I grabbed my cell phone, turned on the flashlight, propped it up against the back of the slats at the corner of the furniture item there, nearest the camera, and then I focused on until that light point was as sharp as I could get it. That was the only focus I was able to obtain. And then I took the photo. I set the aperture, I manually calculated the depth of field to give me the maximum depth of field, going all the way out to the mountains, set the aperture, and this was another very long exposure, even though this was taken on Kodak Tri-X320, judging by the notch code up there. Couple things I would have done. There's not that much I would have done differently about this shot. It's one of the best ones of the interior details that I took. I don't like that the TV at the top is partly there. That's a hair frustrating. I might have moved the camera to the right and dropped it a little bit if I could do it over again, gotten a little bit more window and no TV. The other thing is, if you look up at the top, the corners are kind of curving in. That's because this lens is mounted in a Packard shutter, and I did not squeeze the bulb hard enough to get the Packard shutter leaves all the way out of the light path, and so they cast a bit of a shadow onto the negative. Our last one here is another detail shot. This was, I'm pretty sure this was taken with the Goer's Cellor 12-inch f/5.5. It certainly looks like that lens's image character. At any rate, again, Tri-X320 and portrait orientation shot. Obviously, this was a shot where I wanted to just isolate the little centerpiece on the table and then have everything else be out of focus. And I mean, it's not an award-winning shot, but I was pretty happy with the result in terms of the way that the depth of field just was spot on, and the way that it did actually capture exactly what I wanted it to capture in my mind. And also the exposure on this, aside from some uneven developing on the right side, you might see that little wavy area of slight darkness. That's a bit of uneven development where the Stearman tank I was using, this was not the first negative I developed in it for that night, and the negative got a little bit stuck and didn't fully submerge in the first few seconds of the developing process. So that little spot on the side got a little bit less developing, which is why the negative there was a little bit thinner and the positive is a little bit darker. So probably about 15 to 20 seconds of underdevelopment, maybe 30 in that part of the negative. And so that's it for the shots that I thought were told a little bit about the shoot and had a little bit of a story to tell about what I did right and what I did wrong. Let me know how this video was for you guys and what you'd like to see in this regard in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.